Welcome back, listeners, to a brand new episode of The New Standard. And as always, I have my partner in crime to my left. What's up, Big Neil?
Well, it's a fantastic day. I love this time of the year. This is right on the edge of the eve of business season. We had an active day yesterday across the NFL. There's going to be a lot more of that coming between now and the start of the league year, which is 4 p.m. Eastern Tuesday, March 15th. The tampering period kicks off, or is it Wednesday? Sorry, Wednesday, March 15th. The tampering period kicks off Monday at noon Eastern, in which case we will hear all of the speculation, the beautiful, glorious speculation of who's going where and probably for how much, even though they're not supposed to talk about it, but they do anyway. We're right in front of that, Lance. I love this time of the year. Things are going great. There's your long answer.
Yeah, I've been getting calls myself. I've been getting calls to be a long snapper. So I'm
Oh,
even in demand. So,
tell you what, you
you
get that gig, man. That's in high demand. If you ask any college offensive lineman who's about 6'5", 300, somewhere in there with some athleticism, if they haven't tried long snapping at some point, they're lying to you if they say no. They
no,
all
no.
will, because those jobs are lucrative, and if you can be consistent, you can put together a great career without having to do a whole lot except, be perfect every time you snap the ball, which I can't imagine is easy, but it's worth the risk, in my opinion.
Yeah. I definitely been working out, getting the neck strong.
There
So
you
when I get
go.
hit in the head, yeah, I'm getting and my wrist strength. I got the little dumbbell thing. I'm doing my wrist curls, and so yeah, I'm gonna be the oldest long snapper, 52-year-old long snapper in the NFL. I'm ready to go. So when you hear Lance Williams getting a 1 year guaranteed contract for 750K. If you don't see the show, hey man, I'm out long snapping. So I
Veteran
just
minimum's half that, Lance, but you know what? It's
I'll
probably more
take
than what
half
you're making
that.
now, right?
I,
Because I
I,
know it's
I'll
more than I'm
take
making.
that. So yeah. So hey, so if you don't see the show next week, I'm in camp. I'm in mini camp, long snapping. I'm doing some accounting work for some of the players as well as
Part-time
long
cap
snapping.
management, long
Yes,
snapper,
yeah.
Lance Williams.
And I'm cooking meals as well. Steel cut oats. I'm doing everything. But with that, so also we'll be doing a show in a back closet at the Steeler facility as well. So
The
if you
little
want
office.
to, yeah, if you, oh no, I'm going to move my office upstairs like Russell Wilson. So if you want to catch the show, always you can hit us at YouTube. Go do a search for the New Standard and check us out via podcast by doing a search for the New Standard. I want to jump right into it because we've got an action packed show, and the name of the show is called What's the Standard? And so a lot has been echoed and said about the standard is the standard, the new standard, all these type of standards, the fan standards. Everyone has standards when it comes down to the Pittsburgh Steelers. What's your standard as we go into this business season? When you think of the standard is a standard and all these standards, what do you think of, Neil, when I say or when I ask you, what's the standard for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Standard, truthfully, you want to know the truth? It's a colloquialism. It's a buzzword. Um, I think a less pessimistic view is probably also fair and true. I think it's a cultural statement. I think people take it far too literally. Um, when it first kind of came out early on in Mike Tomlin's tenure with the Steelers, the idea was really more what he was specifically talking about was an injury situation. The next guy up replaces whoever was there, and that the expectation doesn't change because the standard is the standard. It doesn't take a genius to know that mentality in practice isn't feasible. You can't do that. In a salary cap league, there's almost no way your backup is going to be better than your starter. I understand that in some situations it may seem like that, but there's a reason the starter is there and the backup isn't. Um, when Ben Roethlisberger went down, Mike Tomlin is going to tell you in a press conference that the expectations for Landry Jones don't change. Watch the games, okay? There's no way they asked Jones to do the things that they asked Ben to do. Your game plan has to change. It'd be pretty stupid if it didn't. But you don't let Landry Jones off the hook either. He has he has the opportunity at that point to show his worth, to add, a year or two to his contract, in pliability within the league. You want him to have high standards for himself. You want him to have those expectations. That, to me, that's cultural. It's what the expectations are, and it's what players are willing to do to reach that. You want those kinds of players who are not afraid of the challenge, who are not going to use an excuse. You want guys who are ready to fill in and give 100%, do their jobs to the best of their ability for the sake of the team. So the standard is more figurative than literal. And the idea, I think, behind it, the standard itself is something of effort, teamwork, collaboration. To me, I think the best story, I really wish, well, I guess we don't even really try to get people on, but if we could get Brett Kiesel, Aaron Smith, some of the older defensive linemen to come on, or maybe just we ask Cam Hayward at some point what he would say. The longstanding tradition with Steelers defensive linemen have been helping out who's probably the next guy, whoever that happens to be. It was Cam Hayward at one point. It was Brett Kiesel at one point. They all spoke about the veterans who were there before them, going through drills, teaching them different tricks and things like that. That's not common in the NFL. You don't want to give an advantage to the guy who's cheaper and younger and probably there to take your job. But the Steelers had a culture of passing it on. They want the next generation to take responsibility over what they've built before them. And this is a franchise that has had epic defensive linemen, legends. We know about the Steel Curtain. That's really what the Steel Curtain was. It was their front four. Everyone else kind of mooched into it. They passed it on to whoever was next. And the idea was to build this tradition of helping one another for the sake of the team. I think that's the standard. To me, you hear those stories and they're legitimate. Other people are going to say this guy or that guy, he'd always help out. It was a point of emphasis among the players. This wasn't mandated by anybody. Aaron Smith helped Cam Hayward. Cam Hayward is going to help DeMarvin Leal. That they're going to continue to do this, throughout the existence of the team, because they have a reputation they want to live up to. And this is what Steelers football is, in my opinion. So that's my very long-winded answer to that. I'm on a roll today.
The northern wind is rolling. No, that's the autumn wind, and that's the Raiders.
The Raiders.
And I'm always going to mix up cliches and mess stuff up. I'm going to go
part of your charm.
Yes, I'm going to go to Webster's, and I'm going to give you the definition, the Webster's definition of standard, a level of quality or attainment. Now, from the fan perspective, if the standard is championships and winning playoff games and being as competitive as possible, then the standard has not been met recently, and the bar is shifting. So that's why I asked this question, because I think it's an amorphous one, because it changes with everyone and it shifts. But if the standard is excellence, I think that standard hasn't been met consistently enough over the course of the last several years. So I agree with you, Neil. I think the standard is part of the culture that has been created with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Each one teach one, pass it along. The locker room, and we'll talk about the locker room grade later in the show, that there's no haters on this team. that the knowledge is passed down. You got it, you pass it down. That's the standard here. The standard is each one teach one. We put a hand out, we pull you up as I got pulled up. And it's a culture of, and that's the culture inside the building. But the standard of winning is on shaky footing right now. And I think a lot of fans, rightfully so, including myself, are frustrated because the standard seems to be treading water as opposed to really legitimately competing for a championship. So these next few years are going to be very interesting. Now, talking about competing for a championship, we've talked ad nauseum on this show about Mitch Trubisky. Are you surprised by anything that Omar Khan has said? Because he's really sounds like he's doubling down on Mitch being here. He said Mitch has been great. It's been great to have him around. I would look forward to having him around for a long time, not only this year, but for a long time. He talked about Mitch's presence, being a veteran presence in the locker room. I think any young quarterback will tell you having a veteran presence around him is tremendous, especially if you have a guy like Mitch that handles things so well, key things so well. And that sounds like Mitch is okay with being a number two and getting checks and essentially being the quarterback long snapper for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You surprised that Mitch is going to be around for the long haul?
I'm not. If he is, I don't know if that's 100% confirmed. I think one thing we need to remember, and we'll probably get into the Lamar Jackson situation here soon enough. But one thing we need to remember is none of these people are speaking in front of Congress. They're not under oath. Okay, it really. Here's what we know. Realistically, I don't think the Steelers want to pay Mitch Trubisky $8 million this year. That doesn't mean they don't want him, but what they probably want, and this would take root in what Rooney said, in what Khan has said. I agree with this, by the way. This is something I've talked about in this show many times. An extension for Trubisky probably makes the most sense for everybody. I don't blame Trubisky for wanting to be part of a quarterback market that's seeing Daniel Jones get $40 million APY.
Yikes.
At the same time, though, the reason Daniel Jones is getting $40 million APY is because Mitch Trubisky is a legitimate alternative if they don't want a starting quarterback. If they don't want to sign Jones, this is probably the kind of level you're going to get. So while that drives the price up for everybody, what the Steelers need to look at is continuity. They respect continuity in their backup quarterbacks. I think there is a lot of wisdom in the idea that your backup quarterback is a top 20 roster position. I believe that firmly. Trubisky being a top 20 player on your roster, maybe that's a little bit of a stretch, but let's look at it like this. He's a veteran. He's started for you. He's played within this offense. He understands don't undermine the value of a player who knows the other players, somebody who's been there. Because
let me cut you off real quick, Neil. You know what I thought you were going to say? He's a guy with 2 arms, 2 legs.
Well, he's got one arm. I know that.
And a heartbeat.
I'm not sure which one it is, but they could get a variety of guys like that. Yes, you could go get Jacoby Brissett. Could Jacoby Brissett outproduce Trubisky in an even playing field? Yeah. I'm not against that idea, but here's the bottom line. Jacoby Brissett has never set foot in the Steelers facility, as far as I know. He doesn't know the players on the team. There's a learning curve. And when you're not going to get reps, it's probably not as beneficial to you as you might think. Ideally, you want Kenny Pickett starting 17 games. You don't want Mitch Trubisky to see the field. You really don't. Okay? But at the same time, Pickett's had 2 concussions in this season alone, and he only played 2/3 of the year. There's a risk there. You need a veteran who you don't have to worry about prepping. You don't have to worry about them getting acclimated to what's going on. You need to have that solidity. And I think that's what they're talking about. They signed him to a 2-year contract, and there's a reason why he has an $8 million salary in year 2. He took a step up in base salary. For both sides, it's a raise for him, as in if he's going to be the starter again, he's getting more money. If you keep him, he's going to have more money. Even if that's as a backup, he's going to be a very expensive backup. If you don't want him as that, cut him, and he gets to go and be a free agent. That's what they would ultimately have wanted to see happen, because he thinks he's a starting quarterback. There's a lot of money that's out there right now. So keep that in mind. It's not always about the ability of the player. It's about the market in general. Okay. We're not going to break it down to this level, but I am sure we could probably agree, draft class notwithstanding, right now, there are 5, 6, maybe 7 outstanding NFL quarterbacks. Now, they set the bar pretty high. I don't want to say that the ones behind that are junk, but they're not at that level. There's another 5 or 6 of them. After that, huge drop-off. Barring rookies who were just drafted, the veteran quarterback market, they're out in free agency for a reason, okay? What I mean by that is, if it's not Trubisky right now, it's Baker Mayfield. Okay, it was Nick Foles. Yeah, Gardner Minshew. These are players who have had multiple opportunities to be starters and didn't win the job. They didn't earn it. They didn't get the big extension. Baker Mayfield lost tens of millions of dollars in poor performances over his last 10 starts. He fell apart.
He was on 3 teams last year.
Yeah, and he's going to be on 4, and he's not going to get paid much. That's what the market, and when I say not paid much, he's going to get something between Trubisky and probably like Cousins, so depending on what the team need is. But to have that veteran backup who's a potential starter, the price goes way up on that. So Trubisky's $8 million is not going to look like a whole lot on the market, and especially considering, with the exception of Mason Rudolph, there's not another backup quarterback in the NFL who knows the Steelers personnel currently. So he has value. For me, if I were in charge, and I certainly don't need to tell Omar Khan what to do on anything, they want to get an extension. They want to get 2, maybe even 3 years and pay him a little bit less. That's going to make it kind of hard, especially for 3 years. I could see them tearing up this year and signing him to a 2-year deal, something like $12 million, probably guarantee 3 or 4, something like that. They would like to have a steady veteran backup that they know signed for the next 2 years, considering Pickett's, I'm sorry, people don't like this, but his health concerns, you have to worry about that, and continuity. So Trubisky has value beyond him just being on the field, because again, worst case scenario is Mitch Trubisky plays. You don't want that. But worst case scenario is any backup playing over your quarterback. That's the NFL. In a salary cap league with the few amount of reps that a starter is going to get anyway, your backup they need to be ready at the drop of a hat, which takes experience, and they need to have some familiarity about how things work, because their role really is more or less a kind of a glorified quarterback's coach. They're going to prepare the starter. They're there to watch things. They have assignments on game day. That's why they are, they're dressed, obviously. You see them with clipboards and stuff like that, with headphones on. They're communicating. There are things that they do to earn their money. That's why the Steelers always went after Charlie Batch, Byron Leftwich, Bruce Gradkowski. All of these guys had starting experience before they came to Pittsburgh.
You mean backup quarterbacks just aren't over glorified weed carriers?
Well, I think they can do both. I don't think that's impossible.
You know what, Neil? It's hilarious when you talked about, Omar Khan, he's not testifying in front of Congress, but some of these guys, even if they testified in front of Congress, they still would not give away shop secrets.
Yeah.
They would still lie in a way in which they would not be held accountable.
Let's just assume it's good natured. I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm saying that they are probably not revealing their true thoughts on whatever it is. Trubisky's value is in line with what Khan is saying. His salary, though, is not. I don't think they want to pay him $8 million for one more year. I think they would much rather pay him 12 over the next 2. That makes far more sense for the Steelers. I think it makes more sense for Trubisky. I think he needs to kind of accept the fact that this is going to be his role. And he's still going to bank probably $30 million before his career is over. That's how valuable this position is. He shouldn't think he can go out in the market and compete to be a starter. I really don't feel that he should do that. But when you see Marcus Mariota sign for 8-9 to be a starter, the same way Trubisky was, that those opportunities are going to continue to be out there. The difference is last year was not a good quarterback draft. And oddly enough, the Steelers are the team that draft the quarterback that plays extensive time. This is a quarterback draft. So the opportunity for Trubisky is not going to be there. Nobody is going to pay him to be a starter with, in my opinion, 3.5 horses to be taken in the first 5 picks of this draft. One of them I'm not so sure about. The other 3, though, are dudes. They're going to get drafted high. So you put that together, it's not going to be a high-priced backup quarterback market. That's just my opinion.
Looking at the cap implications with Trubisky, currently he's due $8 million in salary. His proration is 2.625. So that gives him a cap number of 10.6. If they were to cut him pre-June 1st, of course, they would take the hit on the proration at 2.625. The cap savings would be $8 million. So, he has one of those deals where, he's like Sicily. He's the Italy's boot. And he has a deal in which he could get severed quickly. But for everything that you said, and I think what Omar Khan said, I think we probably see him in Pittsburgh for the foreseeable future. It's much, whether he's lying or not, it's much better than the GM saying he sucks. We're going to move forward on that guy. I mean, it's much better than that.
GM to say that will have made history. I for the sake of my business and my job, I wish somebody would, but you're not going to see that. And I don't think in that role, anybody who's listened to this show over the last roughly 365 days knows my feelings about Mitch Trubisky as a starting quarterback.
Mitch is the man.
It still makes me mad. I was irrational at the time. It played out probably how I should have thought that it was going to play out. And everybody is better for it. They're a better team. They have a quarterback that they're confident in, that he's going to continue to develop. And Trubisky becomes the right backup. Okay, that makes sense. Got to pay $8 million. It's not my money, but $8 million ain't nothing. I mean, that's a lot of money. Even for a backup quarterback, you probably want to shave that down a little bit, and you'd like to lower the cap while solidifying the position for the next 2 years.
Double H.
It makes sense.
Neil
Mitch Trubisky.
Neil loves Mitch. That's going to be our first. My goal is to have some merch this year, and that might be one of the shirts. Hashtag Neil loves Mitch. We'll do them in gold and black, and then we'll change the coloring of Neil loves Mitch on each particular shirt. Let me ask you this real quick. There was and the really reason I want to talk about this is because Steeler Nation knocks this guy. I think we've shown some appreciation for his play. Who do you think was called last week the quiet assassin? Who do you think on the Steelers was given that nickname?
This year,
the quiet assassin.
Cam Sutton probably be the guy that I'd look at.
It was Dionte Johnson. Did you see the comments where Darius Slay said Dionte is a dog? He's a quiet assassin. He reminds me a lot of AB. Man, he's a great vertical guy. It doesn't shock me that he gets the respect of his peers. I don't know if he's a great vertical guy. I'm not covering him. But I think DJ is one of those guys on the Steelers that's underappreciated. His ability to route run, get separation, get open, and make plays. He just doesn't have, and we're going to talk about the combine, top end, quote unquote, air quotes, traits. He just doesn't have top end traits. But are you surprised by the type of adulation that he was given by Darius Slay? Yes.
I'll say this, nicknames and monikers, cliches like silent assassin, it can mean a lot of things. Yes, the point I was going to make is what Double H just pointed out. He's silent in the sense he doesn't score. I mean, I guess it works. I'm not sure if that's so positive, but no, if anything, I wish Dionte Johnson spoke less. He was silent. I think that's been more of his problem. No, nobody should question my thoughts on Dionte Johnson. I feel I've been fair on him. He blocked me on Twitter. I know that, and I don't think I've ever really savagely ripped him.
I'm mad you didn't tell me that, Neil, because we have to celebrate every time we get blocked. So thank you.
I'm confused. It happens. It's part of my job sometimes.
Yes.
Some of them don't like it and they want to block out any and all negativity. I don't feel I was unfairly critical about him. And at the same time, I promise you, nobody was as excited about that pick as I was when they took him in the third round a couple of years ago. The part I hang up on, and with all due respect to Darius Slay, phenomenal player, one of the best of his generation. Comparing Dionte Johnson to Antonio Brown is comparing a Ferrari to a Toyota Camry. It can't be done except for the fact that they both drive down the road. He's not anywhere close. I am not going to get into it again. Maybe one day just tell me that we're recording a show. Don't actually record it, but let me just go off for 60 minutes about how good Antonio Brown was in his day. People in Pittsburgh don't appreciate it because he went nuts. And I know that he went nuts. Whatever. Fine. I can't deny that. Antonio Brown is legitimately one of the three best players that's ever played for this franchise. And I should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. If he didn't go crazy, nobody would be disputing that.
If
Dionte Johnson is a good NFL wide receiver, Dionte Johnson can't carry Antonio Brown's jock. And if that's why Dionte Johnson blocked me, fine. I don't care. I'll fight for that hill all day.
I think Antonio Brown would still be going to the Hall of Fame if not for the recent pool incident and his bad rap LP.
That's what did it?
That's what did it. It was the pool incident and the rap LP.
Have had enough because he can't rap.
He has no bars. If he had bars, I think he would go to the Hall of Fame, but he has no bars. Let me ask you something. Are you surprised at what happened to Lamar? You think Lamar is going to be a Raven? And if he's not a Raven, how do you think that impacts the division? I think it's 70-30. He's gone. I think the compensation of 2 first-round picks, I'd give up 2 first-round picks if I thought I was fairly close or if I needed a quarterback to get Lamar and pay him. And if Daniel Jones got $40 million, I'm guessing Lamar starts at 45 easily, 45, 47. And I would think that Lamar is never going to play for the Ravens again if they don't get a deal done. I figure he'd sit out because you're not going to make considerably less than Geno Smith and play for less than Daniel Jones. You're just not going to do it if you're a quarterback of the level of Lamar. And I think if Lamar is out of the division, it just helps the Steelers. The Steelers will have the third, not the fourth best quarterback in the division, but the third best quarterback in the division now. They'll bump up one. So, I think it only helps the Steelers. But how do you think this Lamar situation plays out over time?
All right, there's a lot to unpack with this, and frankly, I've had internal and external arguments with people about this. People aren't looking at this from the proper perspective. There are a lot of different things that are going on here. The crux of my argument is going to be this entire thing was set in motion last year. None of this is a surprise to anybody. I understand people thinking that he needs an agent. Doesn't need an agent to do what he did. That, or he can have me as his agent. I could argue this all day. It's not hard. From either perspective, it's not hard. He was franchise tagged He was given the non-exclusive franchise tag because the Ravens want him to go out and see for himself the market they feel that he has. If he is able to do that and they want to give up something for him, they can. Or the Ravens can say, okay, you found it. We'll sign it. Come play for us if that's the amount that you want. We just wanted proof of that. I know that because the Steelers do that all the time. It's not rare for them at all to let a player walk into free agency, see what's there, and if the player comes back and says, all right, well, they gave me this, what do you think? I'd rather play here. And they may sign him and they may not. I know that you remember back in the day, Keenan Lewis, the cornerback that everybody loved in Pittsburgh, he did the same thing. They let him walk into a market. He found a price that he wanted. They didn't want to pay it. I think it was with the Saints back then. And a big part of the reason why the Steelers didn't is because they were concerned of his medicals long term. He played like 12 games the rest of his career, and he broke down. So there's a reason. Jason Worlds, they had concerns about him long term. They wanted Jason Worlds, but Worlds wanted to get paid. Tennessee paid him. I have heard this from a couple different people. He was all but begging the Steelers to match the contract offer that Tennessee gave him. He really wanted to play in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh just wasn't going to do it for one reason or another. He signed with Tennessee and retired like 2 weeks later, and no one's ever heard from him again. So, my point here is that just because a team is not interested in paying up front without any market comparable a certain amount doesn't mean that they're not interested in keeping him. At the same time, just because he's franchise tagged doesn't mean that the only compensation the Ravens can get is 2 first-round picks. The Patriots have done this multiple times. They've tagged guys and traded them for second-round picks before. It's not the value of the quarterback in this position. I understand it's a little bit different, but the main sticking point that you have to remember is Deshaun Watson's contract last year, and with it, Russell Wilson came along. Not only are they massive guarantee contracts for extended periods of time, they brought with them a generation's worth of draft picks that a team had to lose. Everyone who reported and came out yesterday after it was announced that the Ravens had given Lamar the non-exclusive tag, all these teams saying they didn't want him, I would argue what they're really saying is we don't want to give up 2 first-round picks. And I'll throw this to you, Lance, because you said this earlier that I wanted to ask you almost rhetorically. If you didn't have to give up 2 first-round picks, would you want to sign Lamar Jackson?
Absolutely.
That's the question here. And I think the market is going to show that. Again, going back to my point, what I said earlier, it's a quarterback draft. Okay. So you're going to have a tough time getting the kind of return that you saw Cleveland foolishly give up for Deshaun Watson, which should not have happened. And frankly, I don't care what happens in Baltimore. I don't care about Kenny Pickett's development. The worst quarterback in the division, as far as I'm concerned, and what we saw last year, is Deshaun Watson. He was awful.
He was not good. He was
rust my ass. Okay. No, he had time to work the rust off. It didn't come off. He looked terrible in his last game.
Didn't go off.
You worry about that big time if you're Cleveland. That could end up being the biggest blunder in the history of sports. I mean, that's really, really bad. Teams have that fresh in their minds. So they're walking into a situation they fully well could want Lamar Jackson. All right. They're not speaking to Congress. They're not even speaking on the record. They're telling Diana Rossini without their names on the report that they're not interested. 6 other teams fall in line. Everyone's yelling collusion. They're bargain shopping. This is what teams do. Somebody will be interested in Lamar Jackson, in speaking to Lamar Jackson, finding out about what kind of contract he wants, looking into what type of compensation is necessary. He's going to get dealt at some point. Okay. That's my bet. I would go with that. He will be traded. Right now, compensation wise, he's not going to get what Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson got because of Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson. 2, if he doesn't get traded, he's not playing.
Yeah, for sure.
And he knew that last year. Whatever contract that he rejected from Baltimore, in rejecting that contract, he has to know he either needs to ball out, go 18-0, win another MVP and win a Super Bowl, or he needs to expect to be tagged. And if he gets tagged and he doesn't want, if he is insistent upon that fully guaranteed contract and he's not getting it when he is tagged, if that's not coming to him after the next season that he played on in his 5th-year option, he needs to be prepared to go Le'Veon Bell and not play. Because the reality is his value isn't getting better. After you get tagged, you're kind of in jail. It's hard to get more of what you want after you get tagged. It's not impossible, and Lamar Jackson certainly could do it, but it's a big risk, especially for a guy that I don't know. My alpha dog, he's playing a playoff game. If that leg is falling off, he's going to play that game. The fact that he didn't, I don't know, man. To me, that strongly suggests he's not looking to play. And if he doesn't have to, and he doesn't, keep in mind, he got the tag. Until he signs the tag, he's not obligated to do anything. But that $32 million sits on the Ravens' cap. And the Ravens are way over the cap right now. A lot of moves they're going to have to make over the next 4 or 5 days. You're going to see a lot from them coming because they have to fit all this under. That charge, his tag stays on their cap. Whether he signs it is a totally different story. If he doesn't sign it, he doesn't have to go to minicamp. He doesn't have to go to training camp. He doesn't have to play. And when I say doesn't have to, I mean he's not going to be penalized.
He's not doing anything. He's not doing anything except training in Florida.
Yep.
That's what he's doing.
And not getting hit and not getting racking up miles on the odometer and knowing it's one injury away from a team that would absolutely want to have a quarterback. They have until July to negotiate a long-term deal. And frankly, if they didn't get it done by the tag deadline, there's no reason to think they're going to get it done by July. Weirder things have happened, but my bet is right now he's either traded or he doesn't play this season.
Yeah, I think he's out of Baltimore. I think you're right. I mean, I'm hearing Atlanta over and over, but I think he's out. I think he's out of here. I think that's happening. I think his time in Baltimore is over, which is great for the Steelers, although the Steelers have played Lamar fairly well and have had some success against Lamar. You know, it's great when you get one former MVP stud quarterback out of your division. Neil, let me ask you this, because I tried to watch the combine. I mean, I really tried. I tried to say, okay, I want to give some more in-depth content around the players that are coming out of the draft. I wanted to be able to address Mark Sloss's question, who's your top target, Neil, at 17 now that the combine is over? And we'll get into that at some point. I wanted to be able to have the names, the 40 times. But if any of you guys saw my short that I put out, if any of you guys know the 40 time of your quarterback, let me guarantee you he can't hit the side of a barn with a football. I mean, it's just, I tried, Neil, and honestly, I watched, which was up from last year. It went from 15 seconds to 46 seconds. I watched 46 seconds of the combine. How about you? How much did you watch of the combine? And even if you didn't watch the combine, just break down simply what would be the Steelers' biggest purpose, you know, in going to the combine, and typically what are teams' biggest purposes when they want to go to the combine.
This is funny because this gets lost in all the rhetoric of the quasi-union battle against the league over control of the combine, which is really what it is. The highest and greatest value of the combine is the accessibility of the players. It's interviewing them. You ask any scout, any general manager, that's what they're going to tell you. The Underwear Olympics piece of it is for show. The NFL wants it to be a TV event. And what speaks to that probably more than anything is the league mandates coaches or general managers attend the combine and have media sessions. That's the only way you can force reporters to go to the combine to cover it. While they're there, they may as well do all of this. And they do it in a town that's dead otherwise. So they have plenty of accessibility. They want to speak to the players, and they have a process set up to do that. You want to check in on medical. You want to see, to some degree, who's probably more appropriately put, who is not taking it seriously, as in this guy shows up out of shape, he's not fit. You should, with a couple months off, with training like they should be, you should improve physically from where you were, from what they knew of the player before. He should be perhaps a little bit faster than what they thought that he might be. He should be a little bit lighter than he was. He should, be a little bit more impressive physically. You want to see that they've put the work in. And you want to sit down and talk to them and get to know them. You're going to do the pro day circuit. That's another, if you're Mike Tomlin anyway, unfortunately for him, he can only have one dinner at a pro day a night. Otherwise, I'm sure he'd land every recruit. Top recruit, wherever Mike Tomlin goes out to dinner with Mike Tomlin. He always makes sure of that. I always enjoy that part. I don't know if we've talked about that or not. The pro day thing with Tomlin is always a lot of fun from a media perspective. He wants to get to know the young men for who they are. He wants to know their level of character. These are things you have to figure out, and you don't get that from a 40 time. Now, is it going to kill you to know what their 40 time is? No, it's just not the end all be all. Because here's the thing. A lot of people, a lot of observers are just learning about this guy being really fast. Scouts know that. They're aware of how fast the guy is. It's literally their job. Okay. They need to know how fast this guy can run. Now, are they going to say, no, we don't want this guy because he only runs a 4.49 and I want the guy who runs a 4.42? Probably not, because the difference between 4.49 and 4.42 is really not very much. It is a difference. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying that the 4.42 guy is not valuable. They're both pretty damn fast. You're happy with that kind of speed. It's an NFL level speed, but you are not going to rank and file all of them based on this one measurement. They want to know who they are as people, as young men, as potential leaders, guys that they're going to invest millions of dollars into. Imagine that. They want to know who they are. It's not just about the physical part of the game. So that is the value of the combine, top to bottom. Now, are there a bunch of chumbalones and chowderheads who ask weird questions and do stupid things with the prospects? Yeah. These are also typically, and I'm sorry for saying this, but they're meatheads. They're scouts. They're talent evaluators. They're not personnel directors. They're not in charge of interviewing people. They're not there to determine character so much as they are physical prowess. That's their job. When you set people like that loose and let them do whatever, our society shows countless times they're going to do the wrong thing. We still hear about hazing incidents in colleges. Knuckleheads are knuckleheads. If you don't fix that problem, it's going to continue. And that's probably what they have. But the combine in and of itself has a high level of value. It's just probably not the entertainment product a lot of people want. To answer your question, though, I didn't watch 1 second of the combine. I read about it constantly because that's my job, and it gets grating after a while. I don't need to watch it. There's no point. I don't know why they even bother. They have to take a bath financially on it. With the exception of the general managers and or coaches speaking and the players speaking, I don't care. It really doesn't matter. I'll see a list of who ran fast, but I'm going to put that all together, go through the pro day stuff as well, complete a total picture of a player from my limited perspective, because I don't know anything about their character except for what I hear. It's very easy to plant that information. When I formulate my opinion of the prospects the Steelers will look at, it's going to be total and comprehensive. It's not going to be based on one measurement at the combine. That's just, shouldn't need to be said.
My last thing about the combine, and then I want to jump into, what I think is interesting this year about the draft is you have different people running the draft for the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is the first time that has occurred in quite a few years, with Kevin Colbert stepping down and Omar Khan assuming the reins of GM for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Is there any particular thing that the Steelers do? Is there a Steeler way that they approach the combine that might be unique to them and somewhat different than the rest of the league? Is there a Steeler way in speaking of the combine?
I doubt it, except they have trends in terms of draft picks at certain positions. There are certain things that they have typically looked at and looked for. They want high character player. I mean, look, like cornerback is, I can almost guarantee you, going to be one of the first 3 picks that they make in this draft. They want cornerbacks that will hit, step up, support the run. They'll look for those kinds of things. Part of that, you don't really get a good sense of it at the combine, but weight is a part of that. Aggressiveness is a part of it. You look drills and see how hard they're working at those sorts of things. I've heard this many times, and I don't know how legitimate it is, but it does make kind of fantasy sense. The harder the worker, the more willing of a tackler he is. Again, I think that makes sense, but I don't know if I'm going to bet the house on that kind of thing. But they want to see that. They want to be able to build their evaluation. My bet would be, if you got Mike Tomlin in front of Congress under oath, if he has to be honest, if you asked him,
he would talk a lot.
I'm willing to bet he would say he gets infinitely more out of a pro day than he does the combine. Just my guess. That doesn't mean the combine is not relevant. It is absolutely necessary. You don't have the ability to, you have to make it even for everybody. Not everybody can be everywhere at one time. You have to open it up, because it's not like they can call up the prospect right now and talk to them.
Right.
They only have so many opportunities to speak to them. You need to keep that open. Now, their behavior in those interviews remains to be checked, and it should be, because some of the stuff you hear is flat out ridiculous, but that's manageable. You can figure that part out. You still need to have it. I would imagine Tomlin feels similarly, but I think Tomlin really likes the more intimate atmosphere, fewer players, and the ability to chat up on the field with everything that's going on. I don't think he likes the formality of the combine, but it is absolutely a necessary evil.
It's funny that you say that, because the combine, I've always viewed it as the club, and the pro day is the date. The club, you meet her at the club, and then you really meet her when you take her on a date and you have one-on-one interaction with her being the prospect or the player. The player can catch your eye at the combine, but then you really dig into what that player's character is, what his ability is, and you can really dig in and see if you want to invest more time and make a financial commitment to said player.
It's the most logical thing in the world. If people just look at it vastly different for some reason. I've never really understood why. It's not normal. Our normal working market is not anything like that. There are job fairs and stuff. It's not too different from that if you look at it in terms of structure. These kids are vying for a lot of money, and owners, general managers, want to make it as close to accurate a decision as they can. And there's a lot of things that are up in the air that they're just simply not going to know about. They have to get everything that they can know. And some of that is going to be looking the kid in the eye. We've talked about this a bunch. Ozzie Newsome's sit down with Travis Kelce during that whole process. This is one of my favorite stories. It's not connected to me. I read this, I think, in like Esquire or something a while ago. Travis Kelce was he's a more mature version now of what he was like then. He was kind of a hothead, kind of a meathead when he was in college. He got like 7 personal foul penalties his last year at Cincinnati. Just sort of, a guy that you worry about. Ozzie Newsome, they had their meeting time with the Ravens set up, and he's in the room, Kelce is, and Newsome walks in, and it's just Newsome. So one of the most respected, revered general managers in the game, Hall of Fame player, walks in. He writes something on a notepad, puts it down, and he kind of gives one of these and then looks Kelce straight in the eye and says, "Son, are you an asshole?" And Kelce was just like floored. He was just like, okay, nobody's ever asked me that before. And it's Ozzie Newsome asking me this. Newsome obviously didn't draft him, and a lot of teams didn't. He was, a 4th round pick, I think, something like that. He had a reputation of being an asshole. So it makes perfect sense that a general manager wants to look him in the eye and see how he reacts to that question. Maybe it was enough for Newsome to say, no, I don't want him. Maybe they wanted him, but that, they didn't get to take him in the round that they would have taken him in. I don't know. But the point is, sometimes you need to look a person in the eye and see who they are, see what they're like when they're asked something that they're not expecting. They have to give what's referred to as an authentic moment. How authentic are they? Find out a lot of a person, just simply asking questions and listening to their words as well as how they're reacting to the question itself. And
Yeah.
I would suspect the best general managers know how to do that pretty well.
Yeah, there's definitely absolutely value. I mean, if people like myself, although, I'm a 52-year-old long snapper, and of course I have 25 years of experience of perfect snaps, they still want to talk to me. I mean,
A lot of
they,
guys with perfect
you know,
experience.
they still want to talk to me. But speaking of the draft process, of course, we have new individuals managing the Steelers draft process, and I'm reading from an article from Mark Kabali, and he reported that, and correct me if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, Andy Weidl.
Weidl, yeah.
And Weidl's going to put together the board, run the personnel department while getting input from Director of Player Scouting Mark Sadowski and Director of College Scouting Dan Colbert and the Director of Pro Scouting Sheldon White. And he further in the article, he went on to say that the Steelers are going to come up with, or Weidl is coming up with, a new way in which he is evaluating players in terms of how he's giving the grade. So I don't think he's giving the grade, and I did have it highlighted in here. He's not doing a grading like in the past, whatever Kevin Colbert used to do. So he's doing something sort of like, is the guy going to be a day one starter potential role player when he identifies and grades a player? With this new dynamic setup, how much, I mean, do you think this is a big deal? This is going to be a really big change? Or do you think because the man in charge in terms of Tomlin and Omar Khan, that a lot of things are going to be pretty much the same? Or is this going to be kind of a new dynamic going into this process this year?
I think we saw pretty significant change with this organization over the last year. I don't think there's much reason for us to think nothing different is going to happen. It's just, I don't know if we're sure of what has been the same. Somebody made the comment earlier, they need to evaluate what they look for in cornerbacks better than they do. What does that mean? They need to find better cornerbacks. Sure. Everybody does. It's really hard to find good cornerbacks. There are a lot of very average and below average cornerbacks in the NFL. It's not an easy position to play. For example, and I know that I usually get people's blood pressure raised when I say the name Artie Burns. Artie Burns is still in the league. Okay. He's still going to play in the league. He's a big cornerback with experience. He's going to continue to play. It's hard to evaluate the position if your goal is to find an all pro level corner. For the defense that they're playing now, they probably need more of a high level guy. That's what leads me to believe I would think they're going to invest a premium pick in a cornerback. My guess. I don't know who that is where I sit right now, but the idea is, will that be a change on Andy Weidl? By the way, I just listened to a video to hear the pronunciations. Andy Weidl, not Weidl. Is Andy Weidl the assistant general manager, the one that's going to identify the cornerback? I don't know. I think it's a team effort, though. I don't think any, mock drafters and draftniks and social media lead you to believe the draft process is something that it is not. Okay. And I'll rant on this come draft day, because I always do. One person deciding for 32 other teams who they're going to take is the opposite of how the process works. Instead, you've got 100 people deciding who to take for one team at a time. And all those teams are different. They look at different things. They have different evaluations, and they have the insight of what they're trying to do philosophically with their team for now and for the future. So Weidl is absolutely a part of that, and he has a great track record. Philadelphia has run an excellent war room. They are largely the standard of the NFL right now, along with, of course, Kansas City, the team that beat them in the Super Bowl. But Philadelphia has done an excellent job developing their roster, and Weidl was a big part of that. So you're excited about having that sort of perspective available to Pittsburgh. That doesn't mean Andy Weidl is the guy that comes in and says, we have to draft a cornerback in the first round. Doesn't make sense. You don't draft positions, you draft players. Who's the player that they want? Who's the guy that they're looking at that they have the opportunity to get? That is typically a decision that runs through a lot of different people, and a lot of different points of emphasis come with that.
Speaking of that, Neil, one thing that is going to come up, and I like how you broke that down in terms of that this is a significant change in the front office and how things will be done.
Yeah, they've never had an assistant general manager before.
Yes.
Keep that in mind.
But one thing that's going to be consistent for sure is the use of a metric we talked about last year on the show that I've seen pop up a little bit more on Twitter is relative athletic score, RAS. And you can go to RAS.football. And RAS is just a measurement. They take different testing numbers and they put it into an algorithm and they come out with the score, 10 being the highest and 0 being the lowest. And it's rated within green, yellow, and red. Green being great in terms of the position, yellow being average, red being terrible. And I'm going to give you some
great
RAS
athletically for the position.
Athletically for the position, excuse me. And I'm going to give you some RAS scores for some corners who have recently made, some of these, this is just Pro Bowl corners over the last 25, 30 years, their RAS scores and them making the Pro Bowl. Byron Jones had a RAS of 10. Darrelle Revis, who's going to be a Hall of Famer this year, RAS of 10. Rod
Excellent
Woodson.
Athlete. Highly underrated athlete, Darrelle
Revis. RAS 10.
Not surprising.
Marshawn Lattimore, 9.99. Carlos Rogers, 9.98. Patrick Surtain, 9.96. Champ Bailey.
Surtain 2, right? Not his dad.
2, yes. Yes, Pat 2. Champ Bailey, 9.94, gold jacket. Patrick Peterson, 9.93, 8-time Pro Bowler.
Probably a Hall of Famer.
Probably a Hall of Famer. Desmond Trufant, 9.87. Troy Vincent,
I like
9.85, 5 Pro Bowls. So what you can see is Jalen Ramsey, 9.82 in terms of RAS, 5-time Pro Bowler, Super Bowl champion, probably a Hall of Famer. So this metric will be used with Weidl and the department. And it was interesting to hear that RAS kept popping up on the internet as if it was new. But let me get you to some quick hitters real quick, Neil, before we get out of here. Is Jalen Carter on the Steelers still on the Steelers draft board?
No, because there's no way in hell he's falling to 17. I mean, we get into the draft board thing again, you know.
Yes,
it's
and we are going to get into that again. Go ahead and just break it down real quick.
Look, some might remember Mike Tomlin had a conversation with Chase Young, the Washington defensive end. Guy's an alien. On the sideline his rookie year, and Tomlin was praising him up and down. Basically said, this is what the number 2 overall pick looks like. We didn't even scout you, something to that effect. What he's saying is we have no chance of getting you, so we're not going to waste our time. Time is a finite resource. You only have so much of it. You're paying people on a budget. There's no point in sending a scout out this year to evaluate a player who is that freakish in everything. Complete and total freak. I'd be shocked if he's not the best player in this draft. I don't care where he's drafted. Doesn't matter. He is going to be a game wrecker. There's no point in the Steelers drafting at 17. If they, you don't want to have to trade up from 17 to 2 or 1 to get a defensive player. You just don't do that. That's not the way it works. It's a huge amount of capital to spend. So where he is on their board, you're acting like they have a linear board, 1 through 355.
Yes.
They don't do that. It's the least efficient way to evaluate anything. How do you compare then? If you're at 17, how do you compare 5 and 8? What's the difference between 5 and 8 at that point? You know, we've talked about this a bunch, Lance, because I know you're a computer programmer. This is the way it works when you're trying to make a decision. You need to have different buckets of information and know what you prioritize over whatever else. And from those buckets are how you make the decision, not just straight list of all data and throw a dart at one of them and hope it's the highest one on the board. Doesn't make any sense. So a guy like Jalen Carter would get a first round grade. I'm sure. I don't think anybody wouldn't grade him in the first round. There might be a team that, for what we know today, and I don't know, you don't know, nobody really knows. We'll find out. But there might be a team that doesn't like the look of it at all, of what he allegedly did. There are some teams that are going to say, yeah, I don't like it, but this guy's a complete freak and I get paid to win games, not, conduct church. So we'll take him, we'll keep him in line. And there are teams that are going to say, you know what, I don't want anything to do with this. It's too close. It's going to set up a bad reputation. I don't know. I'm making stuff up. I shouldn't even say that. That might happen, but no. If he was a 6th round prospect, yes. No. Jalen Carter's not off anybody's board. There's no way. Absolutely no way.
That Andy Weidl, using his grading system of day one starter potential role player, etc., it has him as a day one starter.
He's a day one starter. If there's a day earlier than day one, he's one of those starters too.
He's a day 0 starter. And big up to Rod Young.
He is an absolute beast.
And big up to Rod Young from Montreal, Canada. Rod, can you send me some of those bagels that I heard that Montreal is famous for? The Montreal style bagel. Let me ask you 2 things real quick. Would you consider the 17th pick, and we're going to get to who we think will be the 17th pick. Is the 17th pick sexy? Is she cute? Is she cute?
I think you're right at the tail end of the viable first round prospects. It's better than 20, which is probably where the cutoff is.
That's her sister, huh?
Maybe. Depends. I've seen wide gaps between sisters before. You never know. It depends on the draft. In
the 52nd pick.
I think you have to combine team need as well as what's available in that draft. And you're drafting a player, so your R1 bucket is going to be these guys that match up at the positions that you want to invest a first round contract into, and depending from there on who's there, you're going to narrow it down to 4 guys. You don't know whether they're going to be available though at 17. So you're preparing yourself for every iteration that might happen, who you'd take in what situation. The fact that the Steelers take 2 seconds or less to make their pick every year in the first round strongly suggests that they have a real good idea who's going to be available and who they want. So
you know what I'm interested in, Neil. I'm wondering if anyone gets Chase Claypool. If we have a Chase Claypool moment at the draft next year.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to break that one out before draft night, probably now for the next 15, 20 years. I won't be the only one. I was dying at the time. I'll go back and find the tweets. I swear I'm the first person that said that, because all due respect, there were not a whole lot of people in Steeler Nation that knew who George Pickens was. And I was COVID ridden and I was bouncing off the walls when they were like 4 picks away and he still hadn't been taken. I was like, it's going to happen. Holy shit, I can't believe George Pickens is going to be available. He should have been gone at like 28. There's no way this guy is available.
And in fact,
I knew Claypool was going. I even tweeted it ahead of the pick. I said, if Chase Claypool announces the selection of George Pickens, I'm going to die. It's just fantastic because he's taking Pickens' job or Claypool's job. And
that was incredible. So we'll have to wait till the second round to see if that's happened, because I'm sure I would imagine it could be somebody associated with Franco.
If you're the Steelers, you're not having a player do that again. My opinion, you're just not. You shouldn't anyway. I don't like that. I think it's unfair to do to the player, because you'll inevitably run into that situation, and it's literally what happened. So we'll miss Franco. Franco announced a couple of those second round picks, and hey, maybe they can trot Ben out there next year. That
You
something
know,
like that would be cool.
I'm trying to find the scores before we get out of here, but I wanted to ask you, did you guys originate that article about the facility scores and all the scores with the facility
That
and
wasn't us. That
that
wasn't.
wasn't you
That
guys?
was the union. The union did
Oh,
that.
okay. The union put that out. Does
Um,
it is that stuff a big deal? I mean, the only
I
thing that was
I have
funny to me was
serious.
that the rats in the shower in Jacksonville. I mean, I found that
Yeah,
very funny.
I think it's. Look, I'm no statistician. In fact, I think you could probably speak to this world better than me. But there's no way that's scientific. You look around, the grades were almost the
No.
same for everybody in certain areas. They loved the training staff. They hated the facilities. It's really kind of the way that
Yes.
it came in. Nobody had a problem with the travel director of their team. That seems odd. It just seemed like a really biased presentation. Now,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say that they don't have legitimate beef, but for example, does the team care about my family, which is how the grade is represented in the survey, is completely different than does the team have a daycare facility on
Yes.
site where I can bring my children? Two completely different things. Don't like
And the
been
Steelers
around the
got a
Steelers. I'm not trying to be a homer. Don't tell me they don't care about players' families.
and
Don't.
they got a D- in
Yeah,
treatment of families.
because
They got
a couple of the players want a daycare. I get it. Maybe they can do that. Maybe that's something they do need to improve. But
my
to
cousin actually
use
did that. I'm not going to
to
name my
use
cousin.
a subjective letter grade that's used in academic settings, and to include an F minus, it's like
That was
that's
great.
petty. That's
Let me
just
let
stupid.
me
Come on.
let
I'm
me
not
give
buying it. I'm sure they're complaining about it because keep in mind, here's the overarching point. Keep in mind, most players are within 3 years of their college days. Colleges use their facilities as a point of recruiting. It's competitive. Alabama, Georgia, they're going to have palaces compared to what the NFL will have. They will have vastly better facilities than an NFL team will, because the NFL team has to pay for it and they're not getting anything out of it. Free agents don't make the decision to sign for millions of dollars with a team based on their facilities. They're just not going to. Not top to bottom. You can't make a good financial argument for that. Certainly, you should improve those things, but it's not going to be what they had in college. For the top level prospects, it's not going to be what they had in college. And
you
they're
mean
probably pissed about that.
you
So,
mean no rats in the shower. That
well, that's
definitely
another thing, and I don't know.
that was
I
hilarious.
don't I don't want to get into the state of Florida. We're already over time. I'm
But with
sure there are
that,
plenty of legitimate gripes
yes.
about those kinds of things coming out of
Yes,
Jacksonville
but
and
with
Miami.
that, we're going to get on out of here. We went a little bit long today, but it's fine. And next week, we're going to talk about the buckets. You got to bring the buckets back, because if you're a new listener, we want to talk about the buckets. We talked about the buckets last year in
Oh
terms
yeah.
of the draft buckets, but we'll bring the buckets back next year. But with that, we are going to conclude the program. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. And Rod, I want some of those bagels. See you.